Great to have you with us, officially in person. You've had a busy few months since we last spoke, raising money, 300 plus customers, MoneyGram relationship, the on-demand liquidity relationship. Talk us through it. It's exciting times.
It's been a really exciting time, and I think it's demonstrative of the momentum in the overall industry, but certainly for Ripple, 2019 was an incredible year for us. We started 2020 with a lot of momentum. I think it really goes back to moving from that speculation that has driven the crypto market to utility, like solving problems for customers. And Ripple's been focused on that for a long time, and as that momentum builds, you're seeing more and more customers come on, more and more liquidity, and that's good for everybody in the ecosystem.
Why is 2020 that year, to your point, that pivotal moment where we look at the utility value here, perhaps, and differentiate from the speculative?
I think one of the reasons why 2020 will be very important is that regulatorily, that's a word, the clarity is getting better. And I mean that globally. Countries like Singapore and Thailand and Switzerland and Japan. I think the U.S. has still an opportunity to do more there, but I think we will probably see that in 2020, and I think that helps catapult the whole industry. I also think you've gone from an industry that has been a little bit in the shadows, and the history of crypto.
Very much in the shadows.
Yeah, I remember actually, you and I were both at Davos, and someone early on in my arrival there, so was like, crypto is still a bad word here. I was like, and
it's a misunderstood word.
It is, and I think a lot of what I'm doing and a lot of what I did in Davos is meeting with regulators, meeting with very senior people at banks and explaining to them how crypto can be used, how specifically XRP can be used to solve a real problem. Not to circumvent regulation, not to circumvent, any government. And I think once people understand that, they very quickly become disarmed. It's no longer a bad word.
Do they understand when you're talking, and you've sort of shifted the focus to on-demand liquidity and these cross-border transactions and facilitating faster, more efficient payments? Can they get a grip with that, perhaps more than the rest of it? Because I think for me, that's something that, particularly from my view, is they get and understand. Yeah.
That is absolutely the case, and even in Davos, to be able to start to talk about that and put numbers on it. Last week, we did $54 million of XRP flows into Mexico. That's 7.5% of all flow from U.S. dollar to Mexican peso.
You were 7% of the market
last week, and that's up from maybe 3% in December. So this is growing very quickly, and look, these are huge industries that can be made massively more efficient by using these new technologies. But I think it goes back to what we said earlier. Like, you have to focus on a real problem, a real customer, drive that utility. Look, with 7.5% of liquidity into Mexico being driven through XRP, you start to really see, okay, this is not a science experiment. There's still a lot of people, I think, in the blockchain industry who aren't familiar with the fact of how much momentum we have here. You had Alex Holmes, the CEO of MoneyGram, on. Yeah, I think that's an example where it's one of our customers using XRP, and it's working.
I mean, he said, look, I was pushing him to see what proportion of the market you could become of the daily volume, and he was like, look, you need a buyer, you need a seller here, so we're only limited in a sense by the number of people that are simply using the platform when they're available here. How quickly do you think, given that you're saying you've gone from 3% to 7% in just a couple of months, how quickly can you scale up? Because it's a tipping point of bringing up more people onto the platform as well as anything else.
Well, the great thing is, and this is true in the markets and here at the NYSE, liquidity begets liquidity.
Yes.
The more activity you see and the more people see, and frankly, it was great. Even the CEO of Bitso, the largest digital asset exchange in Mexico, has been out publicly talking about some of the dynamics he's seen. And instead of being dependent on the speculative trading of crypto as his business, he now can say, look, I have institutional flows represent last week. Just one customer through Ripple is $54 million. That's fabulous for him. On a run rate, that's $2.5 billion flowing through what we call on-demand liquidity, or ODL. That's a big deal for his business, and that brings other players that want to say, well, wait a minute, that's good. I want to be a part of that.
How do you prioritize building that liquidity and your presence there versus saying, okay, now we're going to look for another corridor, another currency pair here, another country? How do you prioritize that, and what brings more customers potentially on board quicker?
Well, so I'll dodge the question a little bit by saying it's the and versus the or, meaning we definitely are prioritizing new corridors. We've talked publicly about the fact we're in the Mexican peso, Philippine peso, and Australian dollar. We've started to talk about some of what we're seeing in Brazil, and we'll increasingly talk about other new corridors. I mean, the good news is we have a lot of demand, and so we'll certainly expand in other corridors. But that isn't to say we do care about liquidity, using the Mexican peso as an example, and we are seeing liquidity naturally grow there because liquidity begets liquidity. And market makers, whether they're existing traditional market makers or crypto market makers, they see the liquidity and they realize, hey, there's an opportunity there, and so it's growing. It's growing very well.
We're after Brazil.
Well, there's certainly, when we look at a framework of which countries, we want regulatory clarity.
And that's key.
And that's an important one.
Yeah.
So there are markets, any remittance market that has a lot of US dollar, euro remittances into other countries, that's a high priority. But if you don't have regulatory clarity, that's a challenge in those markets. Typically you'd say India would be high on our list. India hasn't yet provided a lot of clarity from a regulatory point of view, and so we have not prioritized.
And that's key. You step back until you have that regulatory clarity, because you don't waste the time.
I wouldn't say we step back. We engage. It means a lot of frequent flyer miles for me going to meet. Yes, for sure. And but back to what we said about Davos, it's sitting down with key regulators and explaining to them, this is not circumventing a KYC, know your customer check. It's not circumventing anti-money laundering checks. It's not. Once regulators understand you're not circumventing regulatory frameworks, they get very comfortable very quickly. And they lean in because they understand this is actually helping inclusion in the financial system. The people who are most burdened by remittance costs are those that can least afford it. And that's, I think we all should care.
Who's most open to this? Because I was in Southeast Asia, and the growth in digitization, in payments, particularly for the proportion of the unbanked population, is so huge.
Yeah.
And I do feel like the regulators there are all stepping up. China is another example with, they're even talking about, a yuan digital coin here.
Right.
Who's leading?
Well, it depends a little bit how we talk about leading. China, to your point, it's been fascinating to see. They really, through mining power, control the Bitcoin blockchain. You have 4 miners in China that represent something like 60+% of mining capacity, and 80% of mining capacity is based in China for both Bitcoin and Ether. So in many ways, I think China's been incredibly strategic about how they think about that.
Yes.
And I look at the U.S. and I say, hey, U.S., here we are in downtown New York. We could and should, I think, do more for that clarity to allow for more investment. But you see, I think, a lot of countries around the world seeing that this is a technical wave, this is a major step, and they want to invest in it. They want to see companies continue to invest, and I think that's good for the economy.
Do you think we see, at some point in the near future, a Chinese digital coin, a Fed coin? Because the conversations are being had. Everyone's looking at this and trying to understand what it would mean for them to not be in the game here. And I know we can have the conversation about decentralized versus centralized, and what it would mean even to have a central bank digital coin.
The word central bank.
I know, we're struggling here. However.
Well, look, when I step back and I think about it macro, I think it's really healthy and constructive for the entire crypto blockchain community to see central banks and central governments lean into what can these new technologies do to make our economy more efficient, our payment infrastructure more efficient, any transaction more efficient. So at large, I think it's really positive. Mnuchin was asked about this in Davos, and he made a point which I think has some validity, which is the Fed window in the United States. If a bank goes to the Fed window, they're not getting a crate of dollars, paper dollars. They're getting a digitized, centralized ledger entry. And so there's kind of like, well, what's the difference between if the central bank issues a centralized token versus what they do today? Like, how different is that? Now, there's some governments around the world that might, you could argue, say, well, a central bank could go direct to consumers, and you could have an account with the central bank. I don't think in most of the Europe, US, you're going to circumvent the commercial banks. That doesn't make a lot of sense.
But what about you, for Ripple, building a platform that could perhaps substitute XRP for a Fed coin one day, or
we think about
other...
The XRP ledger as an open source technology, we think about how do we make it really useful for the customers we work with. We also think about how do we make it extensible, and how do we participate in that open source community in a way that makes it extensible to other types of customers. But could central banks? Sure, they could use aspects of that.
Be more efficient, what they create one day.
Yeah, and that ultimately is the underpinning I think we all focus on. How can we make this more efficient for our customers? And right now, the customers we focus on are commercial banks, payment providers. We certainly are thinking about other types of customers we could serve. I mean, I have made the point, I don't know if I've ever said it on air, but I've made the point that in the earliest days of Amazon, it's called Amazon Books. It was a bookseller. It competed with Barnes & Noble, competed with Borders, and when I think about Ripple today is viewed as a cross-border payments company. We view ourselves as a blockchain infrastructure company. The first vertical we've done is cross-border payments. We want to make sure we're winning in cross-border payments before we do another vertical, but we will certainly do other verticals leveraging these technologies.
So you're open potentially in the future at some point to using the Fed coin or the OneCoin. I'm pushing because the head of blockchain technology at JP Morgan told me if the Fed came up with a coin, they dumped JP Morgan coin. So I'm asking you whether you're open to the possibility of...
Sure. I mean, yeah. I think I'm very open. Even if the Fed in the United States is using a coin, you still have a cross-border settlement dynamic where if you have central banks around the world using their digital asset, I don't think it changes the need for a cross-border neutral settlement.
Something in the middle, like an XRP.
And XRP has been extremely efficient. I mean, look, we obviously have a vested interest in that, and we're not bashful about that, but XRP is extremely efficient from a technical point of view in terms of speed, in terms of scalability, in terms of cost, where I'm a Bitcoin holder, but it's not going to solve a payments problem when the transaction time and transaction cost is, almost 1,000x what it is for XRP.
What's going on with the price of XRP, and why did Mike Novogratz weigh in on this and suggest it was going to be another bad year in 2020?
I think the short answer is I think Mike doesn't fully follow Ripple very closely. There's a lot of things he wasn't aware of some of the stuff we're doing in MoneyGram. I think if he watches this, he'll be surprised to hear that we had $54 million of ODL flows last week. Look, there's a lot of experimentation. There's a lot of misinformation in this market, and I think it's important to make sure that the industry is educated, and it's the reason why I try to get out and make sure that we're sharing what really is going on with real customers, solving real problems.
You said you're an investor in Bitcoin. You own Bitcoin.
I am. I do own Bitcoin, yes.
Yeah. So XRP, is that a good investment?
I am going to dodge that question also.
I've seen you dodge that many times.
Look,
What's the investment case? I guess that's a better question.
Well, I'm going to macro all digital assets. I have said very publicly, I think the value of any digital asset in the long term will be derived from the utility it delivers. Bitcoin utility increasingly, I think, is just viewed as it's digital gold. The gold market is a multi-trillion-dollar market, and Bitcoin today is, I think, around $150 billion, $160 billion.
Yes.
Do I think there's an opportunity for Bitcoin to appreciate as more people see it as a useful store of value? Yeah, I think so. Do I think there's going to be other digital assets that increasingly have utility for customers and therefore drive velocity, usage, people holding it, it drives demand? Yes, I think that's likely.
Will the utility value of XRP always outweigh the store of value reason for holding it in your mind?
No, I mean, I think store of value is a dynamic in part. People want to hold assets that are highly liquid.
You called it digital gold, though. Bitcoin digital gold.
Yeah,
Does
increasingly.
XRP have that potential?
I think as XRP has utility through what Ripple is doing and with other people using XRP, and there's a bunch of other companies doing very cool stuff. I mean, a very innovative company called Coil doing interesting micropayments, particularly focused on media. Very fascinating.
Yes.
And so when I look at XRP, I look at the whole. I look at what Ripple's doing, I look at what Coil's doing, I look at what Forte's doing as a gaming company using XRP. I look at the holistic. If there's a lot of utility and people see value in that utility, then I don't worry about it. I often have said, look, I don't think about the price of XRP on 3 days, 3 weeks, or 3 months. Over the coming years, I think that we, Ripple, are focused on driving utility from this asset, and if we're successful with that, we think that's good for the liquidity of the whole ecosystem.
You're a giant. You're seen as a giant in this industry to the point where, your boots at Davos get cult status, quite frankly. It's a strong
It was
point.
Cold in Davos. I was wearing boots.
I wear furry ones. Is the point to make here, perhaps, that there shouldn't be this battle between digital currencies, digital assets here, this belief that one currency needs to rule them all.
Yeah.
Actually, just greater awareness of everything that's going on floats all boats here. And I mixed analogies there, but I know what I'm saying.
I so passionately agree with this point. There is not going to be one winner in the crypto space. I believe that to my core. There are going to be a lot of different participants solving different segments of problems, and I look at what's going on in Bitcoin world, and I don't view it as competitive with what Ripple's doing. I look what's going on in most parts of the Ethereum community. I don't look at it as competitive with what Ripple's doing or what I see happening in the XRP community. I want to see all boats rise. I think if that all boats rise, if the market cap of all digital assets grows, that's good for everybody. And I think ultimately we all need to focus less on what, throwing stones, and more on let's solve customer problems. Let's see scale through solving problems, and then I think it'll take care of itself.
Talk to me about the raising of money and the $10 billion valuation. How do you feel about that?
I think anytime you have new investors come in, you are intimidated by the expectations that are set. By the same token, Ripple today at today's XRP price owns something like 15 plus billions, I think somewhere north of $15 billion of the crypto. So in some ways, those investors came in at a discount. Look, we are in a very fortunate position to have a very strong balance sheet. We're in a very fortunate position to have a lot of customer momentum. And I think it's because we've focused on solving a real problem for real customers.
So why IPO? Why go public, to your point? If you have this money, you're raising money. What's the purpose of going public?
Well, I don't think we've said we're going to go public. I think what we've said, what I said was, I think 2020 will likely have crypto kind of blockchain IPOs. And I think what I said was, I don't think Ripple will be the first, but we certainly don't want to be the last. So I kind of kept it open-ended. I think people heard something a little bit different than that. But look, the balance sheet flexibility we have had has given us the ability to invest over $500 million across the blockchain ecosystem. That includes within XRP world, but also beyond that. Because again, back to I think all boats can rise. So I think having balance sheet flexibility gives us strength to do new things. The MoneyGram deal is a deal I know you're very familiar with, where we invested about $50 million into MoneyGram. And so we want to continue to have the flexibility to grow the business. We have added, more than 150 employees last year. At a time when I think others who've been less focused on solving real problems, there's been a bunch of layoffs in the crypto community over the past, even few weeks. And, we're going to continue to grow. We want to make sure we have the balance sheet flexibility to do that. So
it would be about more money and about potential acquisitions and doing...
Yeah, I think about it as flexibility more than just more money. Maybe I'm parsing words a little bit, but today we have a $10 billion valuation as a private company with a private security. We have shareholders of Ripple. If you're a public company, you have a little more flexibility in the type of deals you might look at.
You mentioned something there which I think is important. I just want to go through it, the court case over whether or not XRP is a security or not. Any clarity coming in the near distant future? It was one of the questions that I know the community would like to know.
Yeah, this is an area where I think we'll continue to engage. I think from my point of view, the good news is we've had very constructive conversations with regulators here in the United States. We'll continue to do that. And I think it's clear to me that there's an opportunity to provide more clarity, and we're working to achieve that.
I was looking at the market cap of MoneyGram, and I know you've got stronger views on this. Just to your point about money, about acquisitions, about expansion, would it ever be worth perhaps acquiring a MoneyGram, or do you risk perhaps upsetting other partners and competitors of theirs, actually, that trade with you or do business with you?
We definitely don't. We don't want to be in the business of competing with our customers.
No.
We want to partner with our customers. And, I think we obviously are a shareholder in MoneyGram, but we're also a shareholder in a number of other companies in the space. And, it's because we want them to be healthy and strong. I mean, Bitso, which is really the leading South American, Latin American exchange, we're an investor there. And we want to see them grow and thrive because they are really good at what they do. And as they grow, we can help them grow. That's good for us. It's good for them.
Fast forward 5 years. Where are you?
Well, I think the overall crypto community will continue to grow at really impressive rates. In 5 years from now, I don't know exactly how to think about that, but I think within crypto world, I think Ripple will continue to grow and take market share. But that will probably be, we're focused on cross-border payments today. I think we'll look at other use cases, as I kind of alluded earlier. And I hope that in 5 years we've got we're not just Amazon Books, but we are Amazon.
And fast forward 1 year.
Ooh.
Kind of tougher.
Probably another cold, rainy day in New York somewhere.
Are you public?
I don't want to put a timeline on that, only because, look, it partly depends on lots of macro dynamics. I mean, on a more somber note, you watch what's happening with coronavirus and these things, and it's hard to put exact timelines. I think we want to have the flexibility to be a public company when it's right for Ripple to be a public company.
I can see you're enthused. You get a sense when you talk to, creators of businesses that is something that's part of the plan. And
I think it's part of the journey. I mean, there's kind of a meme in Silicon Valley, almost an anti-public thing where companies have waited. And I'm of the mind that, look, it can be a very constructive step. Although I've also said inside the company, people talk about the IPO as an exit. I'm like, no. An IPO is a beginning. Yeah. It's not an exit. It's a step in the journey. A financing event is a step in the journey. I always am a little bit quizzical when I see some of these companies go public and they're have these huge celebrations. It's like, look, that's when expectations just went up. I mean, you asked me about a $10 billion valuation. Like, as a public company, it's even more on the center stage, and that's when the hard work. I mean, yes, we're working hard now, but it only ups the ante.
Give me this. XRP higher or lower in 1 year time?
Depends on so many things.
I knew you'd dodge that. Great to chat to you.
It's really nice to talk to you.
Likewise.
Thank you.
Thank you.